A millionaire who hated being touched had his life transformed when a single mother-to-be approached to fix his tie. What happened in that moment changed everything forever. A story of love and overcoming that will touch your heart. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment where you are watching from. The air conditioning in the event hall of the Ritz-Carlton hummed discreetly, battling the suffocating heat of December in New York City. The golden lights of the crystal chandeliers reflected off the dark suits of the executives circulating among the tables, glasses of French champagne in hand, and conversations about corporate mergers on their lips. The aroma of gourmet hors d'oeuvres and imported perfumes lingered in the air, creating that artificial atmosphere of sophistication that characterized elite business events in New York. Ryan Mitchell adjusted the cuff of his Italian shirt for the 10th time in 5 minutes, his long, nervous fingers smoothing the already impeccable fabric. At 32, the CEO of Mitchell Construction and Associates possessed the kind of natural elegance that made people turn when he passed by. His dark brown hair was always styled with millimeter precision, his honey-colored eyes rarely showing emotion, and his upright posture betrayed years of etiquette lessons. But there was something in his gestures that attentive observers would notice. The way he avoided prolonged handshakes, how he subtly stepped back when someone got too close, how his shoulders tensed when a secretary brushed against him while handing over documents. "Ryan, you look like a robot at these parties," murmured Jake Thompson, his best friend since college and business partner, approaching with 2 glasses. Jake was the opposite of Ryan, stocky, laid back, with an easy smile that broke any tension. "Relax, man. It's December. Time for celebration. Even the big shots on Wall Street pretend to be human this time of year." Ryan accepted the glass without touching his friend's fingers, a movement so natural that Jake didn't even notice. "I need to be here, Jake. The contract with the city is being signed on Monday. I can't afford to offend anyone." "You never afford yourself anything." Jake rolled his eyes. "When was the last time you just lived? No schedules, no meetings, no obsession with control?" Before Ryan could respond, a feminine voice sounded behind him. "Excuse me, sir, your tie is a little crooked." Ryan turned abruptly, prepared for the automatic defensive move he always made when strangers approached. But something made him hesitate. In front of him stood a woman about 25 years old, wearing a simple cleaning uniform. Black dress pants and a white blouse, with the cleaning service's logo embroidered on the pocket. Her brown hair was tied up in a practical bun, and a few rebellious strands framed a face with delicate features devoid of makeup. But it was her eyes that paralyzed him. Brown like melted chocolate, filled with a genuine kindness he hadn't seen in years. "May I?" she asked, already raising her delicate hands toward the knot of his tie. Ryan should have stepped back. He should have murmured an apology and moved away, as he always did. But there was something about this woman, perhaps the naturalness of the gesture, perhaps the shy smile, perhaps the rounded belly that indicated a pregnancy of about 6 months, that kept him still. She touched the fabric of the tie with surprisingly warm fingers, adjusting the knot with precise and careful movements. Ryan felt the world shrink down to that small space between them. Her scent was simple, soap and a hint of cheap moisturizer, but somehow more comforting than any French fragrance. He could hear her breathing, slightly labored from the pregnancy, and when she leaned in to adjust the tie better, a strand of hair brushed against his face. "All done," she said, stepping back and admiring the result with satisfaction. "Now it's perfect. Sorry to bother you, but it was pretty obvious." Ryan instinctively touched the tie, still processing what had just happened. For the first time in years, since he was 8 years old to be exact, the touch of another human being hadn't made him break out in a cold sweat or tremble. It hadn't triggered the series of traumatic images that always came when someone touched him unexpectedly. It had been comforting. "Thank you," he managed to murmur, his voice coming out rougher than he intended. "No problem," she smiled, already preparing to step away. "I have to get back to work. Good night, sir." "Wait," Ryan called before he could control himself. What's your name?" "Clara," she replied, looking surprised by the question. "Clara Johnson. And you are—" Jake, who had been watching the entire scene with an expression of absolute shock, cleared his throat loudly. "This is Ryan Mitchell, Miss Clara, the owner of the party." Clara's face transformed into a mix of horror and embarrassment. Her cheeks flushed intensely, and she took another step back, as if finally realizing the enormity of what she had done. "Mr. Mitchell, I'm sorry, I didn't know, I shouldn't have—" She stammered, one hand automatically protecting her belly. "That was very inappropriate of me. I apologize." "No," Ryan said quickly, surprising himself. "Don't apologize. It was kind of you." Clara studied him for a moment as if trying to decipher whether he was being sincere. At the back of the hall, one of the supervisors from the cleaning service waved at her, clearly impatient. "I need to go," she finally said. "Good night, Mr. Mitchell, sir." She looked at Jake. "Jake Thompson," he introduced himself, still looking perplexed. "Miss Johnson, it was a pleasure." Ryan watched her walk away, noticing how she moved carefully due to her pregnancy, how she paused to pick up an abandoned glass from a table before heading to the kitchen. Even in uniform, even clearly out of place in that luxurious environment, there was a natural dignity about her that he was intrigued. "What the hell just happened?" Jake whispered beside him. "I don't know," Ryan murmured, still touching the tie she had adjusted. "Ryan, you let a complete stranger touch you. A pregnant stranger adjusted your tie, and you didn't run away or have a panic attack. You don't even realize how surreal that is." Ryan finally diverted his gaze from the kitchen door, where Clara had disappeared. Jake was right. It was surreal. In 24 years dealing with his aversion to physical touch, a result of traumas he preferred to keep buried, that had been the first time human contact hadn't terrified him. "She's different," was all he could say. "Different how? Ryan, she's a temp worker, pregnant, clearly from a completely different social class than ours. You can't be thinking—" "I'm not thinking anything," Ryan cut him off, but his voice didn't sound convincing even to himself. The rest of the night passed in a blur. Ryan greeted the necessary guests, closed the deals he needed to close, smiled for the photos that would appear in the social columns, but a part of his mind remained in the kitchen, imagining Clara washing dishes or organizing utensils, those same delicate hands that had touched his tie, now submerged in soapy water. When the event finally ended and the last guests left, Ryan found himself searching for her. But the cleaning crew had already left, leaving only the immaculate ballroom and the echo of women's heels on the cold marble. In the hotel parking lot, sitting on the leather seat of his black BMW, Ryan remained still for long minutes. The lights of Wall Street flickered outside, and the nighttime bustle of New York City continued its frantic dance, of cars and people that never slept. But he was stuck in that singular moment, the gentle touch of unknown fingers adjusting his tie, and the unprecedented feeling of peace it had brought. For the first time in years, Ryan Mitchell allowed himself to imagine what it would be like to be touched without fear. The January heat in New York City was suffocating, even at 7 in the morning when Ryan arrived at the office on the 23rd floor of one of the most modern buildings on Wall Street. The air already carried that heavy humidity, promising another scorching day. The panoramic windows of his office offered a privileged view of the concrete jungle stretching to the horizon, where mirrored skyscrapers reflected the first rays of sunlight like golden blades. It had been 3 weeks since the December event, and Ryan couldn't get Clara Johnson out of his mind. He had tried to discreetly research her through the temp agency, but the information was minimal. She worked multiple jobs, had a small daughter, and the baby she was expecting would be born in April, nothing that justified the obsession he was developing. "Good morning, Mr. Mitchell." Marcia, his secretary, for 5 years, entered carrying a cup of coffee and a folder full of documents. She was a woman in her 40s, as efficient as a Swiss watch, who had learned to respect his quirks without questioning them. "The meeting with the architects has been rescheduled for 10, and the environmental impact report arrived this morning." "Thank you, Marcia." Ryan accepted the coffee without looking at her, focused on the contracts scattered across the mahogany desk. "Oh, and I need someone to organize my office. It's disorganized." Marcia frowned, looking around. The office was immaculate as always, every book aligned, in alphabetical order, every pen in its proper place, not a speck of dust on the surfaces. "Disorganized, sir?" "Yes. Hire someone, preferably from the same agency that provided services for the December event." It was a blatant lie, and they both knew it. But Marcia had learned that certain eccentricities of her boss were better left unchallenged. "I'll take care of it, sir." 2 hours later, Ryan heard voices in the outer hallway when the elevator arrived. Marcia was talking to someone in a professional tone, explaining the boss's preferences and working hours. When the door to his office opened, Ryan felt his heart inexplicably race. Clara Johnson entered hesitantly, wearing a simple outfit, jeans and a light blue cotton blouse that gently accentuated her 7-month belly. Her hair was loose today, falling in natural waves over her shoulders, and she carried a synthetic bag and a basic cleaning kit. When their eyes met, Ryan noticed the same surprised recognition she felt. "Mr. Mitchell," she said, clearly uncomfortable, "I didn't know this would be for your office." "Clara!" He stood up, smoothing his tie in a nervous gesture. "It's good to see you again. Marcia explained what you need. Can I start with the files?" Her voice was formal, professional, but Ryan caught the underlying tension. "Of course. Make yourself at home." Ryan pretended to work while discreetly watching her. Clara moved carefully around the office due to her pregnancy, but there was a natural efficiency in her gestures. She reorganized papers that were already organized, wiped surfaces that were already shining, always maintaining a respectful distance from him. It was when she opened her bag to grab a microfiber cloth that the aroma reached him. It was a homely, comforting smell, a mix of chicken pot, pie and chocolate fudge that she had prepared for lunch. The scent wafted through the office's air conditioning like a ghost from the past, instantly transporting Ryan to a small, cozy kitchen 30 years ago. He was 7 years old, sitting on a high stool, watching his grandmother Mary work. She was a small but strong woman with calloused hands that created magic in the kitchen. The smell of chicken pot pie frying in hot oil mingled with the sweet aroma of bubbling chocolate fudge, while she hummed old sambas and made him laugh with silly stories. "Ryan, my grandson." Her voice echoed in memory. "One day you will be an important man, but never forget that food made with love is what feeds the soul." She passed away when he was 8 years old. 2 weeks later, he went to the first of several foster homes. "Mr. Mitchell," Clara's voice brought him back to the present. "Are you okay?" Ryan blinked, realizing he had been frozen for several minutes, staring at a point on the horizon beyond the windows. Clara was standing a few feet away, her face marked by genuine concern. "I'm sorry, it's the smell of your food brought back a memory." Clara looked at her bag as if it were guilty of some crime. "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't think it would bother you. I can eat outside." "No." The response came out louder than Ryan intended. He softened his tone. "Please, stay. Actually, it's been a while since I've smelled something like this. Homemade. I made it for my daughter," Clara explained shyly. "She loves chicken pot pie, so I always prepare some for the week. And the chocolate fudge." She smiled, one hand touching her belly, "is a constant craving during pregnancy." "How old is your daughter?" "5. Her name is Sophia." Her face lit up as she spoke about the girl. "It's just the two of us. 3 now," she added, stroking her belly. Ryan felt a pang of curiosity and something else, something he couldn't identify. "And the father?" Clara's smile disappeared instantly. She looked away, focusing on cleaning an imaginary dusty shelf. "He's not part of our lives," she said simply. The silence that followed was heavy. Ryan regretted the indiscreet question, but something in her defensive posture awakened a protective instinct he didn't know he had. "It must be enough," he commented gently. "Alone, pregnant, working. I'm not completely alone," Clara replied, still not looking at him. "My mother-in-law, Sophia's grandmother, helps me with her. Mrs. Smith is a saint. She takes care of Sophia when I need to work on weekends." "So why aren't you with the child's father?" Ryan couldn't help himself. This time Clara completely stopped what she was doing and faced him. Her brown eyes sparkled with a mix of pain and determination. "Because he died," she said simply. "Motorcycle accident a year ago. He never got to know about the baby." Ryan felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. "Clara, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have asked." "It's okay." She resumed her work, but Ryan noticed her hands trembling slightly. "People always ask. It's natural." "How did you meet?" This time she smiled, a small but genuine smile. "On the bus. I was coming back from work. Sophia had a fever and was crying a lot. He offered his seat and helped calm her down. We talked until I got off. 2 weeks later we ran into each other on the same bus." She shrugged. "One thing led to another." "Was he a good man?" "He was. Hard-working, kind to Sophia. He dreamed of having his own workshop." Her voice became distant. "He was working 2 jobs to save money when it happened." Ryan watched how she unconsciously touched her belly, protecting the child who would never know her father. There was a silent strength in her that impressed him, not the theatrical strength of the executives he knew, but something deeper, more real. "And you? Did you always want to be a businesswoman?" Clara asked, clearly trying to shift the focus of the conversation. Ryan hesitated. It was a simple question, but touching on his past was always complicated. "Not exactly. When I was a child, I wanted to be an engineer, build things, create. The business part came later." "When did your parents die?" The question caught him off guard. Clara had stopped pretending to clean and was looking directly at him, those brown eyes filled with an understanding he hadn't expected. "How do you—" "Mrs. Smith mentioned that you grew up with your grandmother, and—" I recognized the expression of someone who lost their parents early. Ryan nodded slowly. "Car accident. I was 8. That must have been very difficult. My grandmother did her best, but she passed away a few months later. Heart failure." He paused, surprised at himself. He never talked about this with strangers. "Then it was foster homes. That's why you don't like to be touched." It wasn't a question. It was an observation made so naturally that Ryan felt as if she had read his soul. He looked at her, searching for pity or embarrassment, but found only understanding. "How do you know?" "I have eyes and experience. Sophia also went through a phase like that after her father left. She was afraid to get close to men." Clara smiled sadly. "A child needs to feel safe to accept affection." "I'm not a child." No, but the scared boy is still inside, isn't he? The observation was made without malice, almost as if she were talking to herself. But it struck Ryan like lightning. No one had ever seen him so clearly, let alone a woman he had known for only 3 weeks. The phone rang, breaking the moment. It was Mrs. Smith, announcing the arrival of the architects for the meeting. The reality of the corporate world rushed back into the office like a cold wave. "I need to take this meeting," Ryan said reluctantly. "Of course, I'll finish here and head out." "Clara," he called her as she was already at the door. "Tomorrow, could you come back? The office still needs organizing." She studied him for a long moment, as if she knew exactly what he was doing. "I can, Mr. Mitchell. Same time?" "Ryan," he said impulsively. "You can call me Ryan." The smile she gave him before leaving was worth all the boring meetings he would have to endure for the rest of the day. The sound of drums echoed through the streets of Brooklyn like a giant heart beating in the chest of the city. It was Carnival Saturday, and even those trying to escape the party couldn't ignore the contagious energy taking over New York City. The smell of churros and cotton candy mixed with the aroma of cold beer and sweat from the crowds as improvised blocks appeared at every corner. The corner transformed the urban landscape into an explosion of colors and music. Ryan had escaped. That's how he felt, like a fugitive from his own life. The party that Jake had organized in his apartment in Brooklyn was filled with the same familiar faces: business people, lawyers, heiresses from traditional New York families, everyone sipping French champagne, discussing the same old topics, wearing the same social masks as always. When a silicone-enhanced blonde began shamelessly flirting with him, leaning in so that her chest brushed against his arm, Ryan simply left. Now he wandered aimlessly through the streets of Brooklyn, his hands buried in the pockets of his jeans, a rare concession to the weekend, trying to process the claustrophobia he increasingly felt in social gatherings. It was as if his skin had developed an allergy to the world he was born to live in. For the past 3 weeks, Clara had shown up at his office every day, officially to organize things that were already organized. In practice, for conversations that grew deeper with each meeting. She had a way of asking questions that disarmed his defenses, of listening that made him feel truly heard for the first time in years. Ryan discovered that she woke up at 5 in the morning to prepare breakfast for Sophia before leaving her with Mrs. Smith, that she worked as a cleaning lady at 3 different places in addition to his office, that she dreamed of having her own diner where she could sell the chicken pot pies and sweets she made so skillfully, that she read to Sophia every night, even after exhausting workdays, because she believed education was the only real inheritance she could leave for her daughters. In return, he had shared memories he had kept locked away for decades. He spoke about the feeling of abandonment in temporary homes, about how he developed his obsession with control as a survival mechanism, about how he built a business empire trying to fill a void that he now realized no amount of money could satisfy. It was as if she had found a language that his soul recognized. Ryan Mitchell. The feminine voice made him turn abruptly. For a moment his heart raced, thinking it was Clara, but it was an older woman, around 50, with grey hair neatly tied in an elegant bun and simple yet well-kept clothes. There was something familiar about her face. "Mrs. Smith," he said, the memory clicking. Clara had mentioned her mother-in-law several times, always with affection and gratitude. "Exactly. You're a friend of Clara, aren't you? She talks a lot about you." Ryan's heart raced again. "She does?" "Oh, yes, she says you're very polite, very lonely." Mrs. Smith studied him with keen eyes. "Are you escaping from a party too?" Ryan laughed, surprised by the woman's perception. "How did you guess?" "I recognize the expression. My late husband had the same look when he wanted to escape family gatherings. She pointed to a nearby bench under a tree. May I? These legs aren't what they used to be. They sat watching the street's activity. Whole families passed by. In costumes, children ran with colorful balloons, and the distant sound of a street festival created a festive soundtrack for the afternoon. Is Clara doing well? Ryan asked, trying to sound casual. Tired. She works too much for a 7-month pregnant woman. Mrs. Smith glanced at him sideways, but more cheerful lately. She says she got a good job with a kind boss. And Sophia? Oh, that girl. Mrs. Smith's face lit up. Smart as a whip. Yesterday she asked me if all rich men were sad like Uncle Ryan. Ryan choked. I'm Uncle Ryan. That's how she refers. To you. Clara must have mentioned you at home. Mrs. Smith frowned. I hope you don't mind. Sophia has a knack for forming bonds since she lost her father. I don't mind. In fact, it's nice. They fell silent for a few minutes, watching 2 children play tag among the street vendors. The smell of corn on the cob floated in the air, mingling with the traditional aromas of the street festival. Can I ask an indiscreet question? Mrs. Smith finally said. Of course. Do you have serious intentions with my daughter-in-law? The question was asked with the frankness typical of women of her generation, without pretense or diplomacy. Ryan felt his face heat up. I'm not sure I understand. You do. Clara is a special woman, Mr. Ryan. She has been through a lot of suffering, but she keeps her heart open. She doesn't deserve to be hurt by someone who is just playing. I'm not playing, Ryan replied before he could think better of it. So you're interested in her? It wasn't a question. Ryan sighed, running his hands through his hair. It's complicated, Mrs. Smith. We come from very different worlds. Nonsense. Different worlds are those who don't have the same kind of wounded heart trying to heal. Before Ryan could respond, shouts of joy echoed from the street. A small carnival parade had appeared at the corner, with an improvised band and revelers singing classic tunes. And in the midst of the small crowd, Ryan saw 2 familiar figures. Clara danced slowly, her hands protecting her belly, a radiant smile on her face. She wore a simple cotton dress, printed with flowers, and her loose hair swayed to the rhythm of the music. Beside her, a small girl with curly hair jumped excitedly, wearing an improvised princess costume made from a golden trash bag and a paper tiara. Sophia. It had to be her. Mummy, can I get a funnel cake? The girl shouted, trying to be heard over the music. Only if you eat all your lunch first, Clara replied, laughing. I promise, please. All right, princess, but just one. Ryan watched in fascination as Clara took some coins from a small purse, counting carefully before handing them to Sophia. There was no abundance there. Every penny was calculated, but there was also no shortage of love. Oh, joy! Shall we greet them? Mrs. Smith suggested, already getting up. I don't know if that's a good idea, but it was too late. Mrs. Smith was already heading towards the 2, and Ryan had no choice but to follow her. Clara! Sophia! Mrs. Smith called out. Clara turned, and Ryan saw the exact moment she recognized him. Surprise, embarrassment, and something that seemed like pleasure quickly passed over her face. Mrs. Smith, what are you doing here? Clara approached, one hand automatically smoothing her dress. And, Ryan, look who I found sneaking away from a fancy party, Mrs. Smith said with a mischievous smile. Sophia had stopped jumping and was watching Ryan with unabashed curiosity. She was a beautiful child, with the same brown eyes as her mother and a smile that showed she had recently lost a front tooth. Are you Uncle Ryan? She asked unabashedly. Ryan crouched down to her level, a gesture that surprised him. Normally, children made him uncomfortable, but there was something about Sophia. That's me, and you must be Princess Sophia. Her eyes widened. Did Mommy tell you I'm a princess? She did. She said you're the bravest princess in New York City. Sophia laughed, delighted. Then, without warning, she stepped closer and touched Ryan's hand. Your hands are soft. They're not working hands. Clara turned red. Sophia, that's not nice to say. It's okay, Ryan quickly said. She's right. My hands only know how to sign papers. What kind of papers? Sophia asked, genuinely interested. Papers to build big buildings. Like castles? Ryan looked at Clara, who was watching him with an unreadable expression. Like castles, yes. Cool. Can you build a castle for my little sister when she's born? Clara's embarrassment was palpable. Sophia, Uncle Ryan doesn't build small houses. He builds very big, very expensive buildings. Actually, Ryan gently interrupted, building a castle for a little princess would be a very special project. The smile Sophia gave him felt like a punch to the heart. Pure, innocent, full of absolute trust. When was the last time someone had looked at him like that? Ryan, Clara said softly, you don't have to. Can I talk to you? He interrupted her. In private? Mrs. Smith, who had been observing the entire exchange with interest, reached out her hand to Sophia. Come, Princess. Let's get that funnel cake while your mum talks to Uncle Ryan. Okay, but I want the dulce de leche one, Sophia said, already pulling her grandmother towards the vendor. Ryan and Clara were left alone in the midst of the small crowd, dancing to the sound of drums. The smell of corn on the cob and the warmth of the sun created an almost surreal atmosphere for a conversation that Ryan felt could change everything. Clara, he began, but didn't know how to continue. You don't have to be nice to her because of me, Clara quickly said. Sophia gets attached easily, and I don't want her to get hurt when what? When you get tired of playing normal? The phrase hit him like a slap. Is that what you think, that I'm just playing? Clara crossed her arms, protecting her belly. I don't know what to think, Ryan. For 3 weeks, you've been popping into my life, hiring me for a made-up job, talking to me every day as if we were friends. And now you show up here, in my neighborhood, in my world, being nice to my daughter. She shook her head. I don't understand what you want. I want... Ryan paused, struggling to find words for feelings he didn't even fully understand. I don't know what I want, Clara. I just know that when I'm with you for the first time in years, I feel real. Real? She repeated skeptically. No masks, no acting, just me. Clara studied him for a long moment, the sound of the drums filling the silence between them. And what happens when you remember who you really are, when you remember that I'm just a cleaning lady pregnant from a place you never belonged to? Maybe, Ryan said softly, taking a step towards her. The place I never belonged to is that world I've been running away from. Clara's eyes filled with tears that she blinked quickly to hold back. Ryan! Mommy! Uncle Ryan, come see! Sophia shouted, waving a funnel cake in her hand. There's a clown doing magic! The moment was broken, but Ryan felt that something fundamental had changed between them. Clara looked at him for a few more seconds, then walked towards her daughter. Come, she said without looking back. Sophia will be upset if you don't see the magic. Ryan followed her, knowing he was crossing an invisible line, but for the first time in his life, he didn't care where that line would lead him. Autumn arrived in New York City like a sigh of relief after the sweltering heat of summer. The March mornings brought that fresh breeze that made the leaves of the trees on Wall Street dance in a golden choreography, announcing the change of season. But for Ryan, the arrival of autumn marked much more than just a climatic change. It marked the end of something that hadn't even officially begun. Clara didn't show up at the office on Monday. The doctor recommended complete rest, Marcia explained, reading a handwritten note that had been delivered by an older woman, probably Mrs. Smith. High blood pressure. She needs to go on maternity leave immediately. Ryan read and reread the note, recognizing Clara's neat handwriting. Some words were smudged, as if she had cried while writing. "Thank you for the opportunity and for your kindness. May God bless you always, Clara." It was a farewell disguised as gratitude. "Sir?" Marcia watched him with concern. "Do you want me to find someone else to do the cleaning?" "No," Ryan murmured, folding the paper carefully. "No need." In the following days, the office felt strangely empty. Ryan found himself looking at the chair where Clara used to sit during work breaks, where she would eat her chicken pot pies. As she shared stories about Sophia or expressed concerns about her pregnancy, the smell of industrial coffee from the company seemed bitter compared to the comforting aroma of home-cooked meals she brought every day. Worse still, problems at the construction company began to pile up like storm clouds on the horizon. "Greenpeace is organizing protests." Jake walked into the office on Wednesday, throwing a stack of newspapers onto the table. The headlines were devastating. "Mitchell Construction threatens protected area. Luxury versus nature. The cost of progress. Millionaire businessman ignores environmental impact." "What do you mean, protests?" Ryan flipped through the newspapers, feeling a throbbing headache start behind his eyes. "The condominium project in the suburban area. Apparently they discovered there's a freshwater spring on the land we bought. Environmentalists are saying we're going to destroy a micro-ecosystem." Ryan leaned back in his chair, massaging his temples. The suburban project was one of the company's largest contracts, 15 high-end residential towers that would generate enough profit to expand the business to other states. Without it, the construction company would face serious financial difficulties. "We didn't know about the spring," Ryan said. "The environmental impact study didn't mention—" "I know we didn't know, but that doesn't matter now. The press is painting you as a greedy tycoon who destroys nature for money." Jake sat down heavily. "There's more. Some investors are nervous. The Santoro family wants to revise the financing contract." "Revise how?" "They want more guarantees. And there are rumors that foreign businessmen are interested in the company. They say we could be vulnerable to a hostile takeover if the stock value drops too much." Ryan felt as if the world was crumbling around him. Building that company had been his way of proving he could create something solid, permanent, after a childhood marked by instability. The idea of losing it to strangers was unbearable. "We have lawyers. We can sort this out." "Ryan," Jake's voice was gentle but firm, "you need to focus entirely on work right now. No distractions." Ryan knew exactly what kind of distraction his friend was referring to. Over the past few weeks, Jake had noticed his obsession with Clara. The constant glances at his phone, waiting for her to call. The way his mood drastically improved on days she showed up at the office. "She's not a distraction," Ryan murmured. "No? Then why are you here thinking about her instead of focusing on the crisis that could destroy everything we've built?" The question hit Ryan hard, because it was true. Even amidst the professional chaos, a significant part of his thoughts was occupied with worries about Clara. How was she feeling? Had the pressure gone down? Was the baby okay? Mrs. Smith was managing to help enough with Sophia. "You're right," Ryan finally said. "I need to focus on the company." "Good. Now, about the environmentalists." They spent the rest of the afternoon devising damage control strategies, consulting environmental lawyers, and trying to find ways to modify the project to appease the critics. When Ryan finally looked out the window, the sun was already setting, painting the New York City sky with fiery orange hues. His personal phone vibrated, a text message. "Good evening, Ryan. I hope you're well. Sophia asked about you today. She said she's still waiting for the little princess's castle. Clara." Ryan stared at the message for long minutes. It was the first direct communication they had received since she had stopped coming to the office. simple, polite, but carrying a subtext he couldn't decipher. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. He had 1,000 things he wanted to say, that he missed their morning conversations, that he was worried about her health, that her absence had left a void in the office that no work could fill. But Jake's words echoed in his mind. No distractions. Instead, he typed, "Thank you for the message. Tell Sophia I haven't forgotten about the castle. Take care." He sent it before he could change his mind. The response came. Almost immediately. "She'll be happy to know. Good luck with your projects." There was a formality in the exchange that cut Ryan like a blade. It was as if they were reverting to established social roles, the successful businessman and the pregnant employee who needed to take care of her own life. On Thursday, things worsened. The New York Times published an investigative report on Mitchell Construction, questioning not only the suburban project, but other previous ventures. There were photos of Ryan entering and leaving meetings, always alone, always with that serious expression the press was painting as business arrogance. "Who is Ryan Mitchell?" was the title of the article. The 32-year-old businessman who built an empire but seems incapable of building human relationships. The report speculated about his personal life, mentioning that he had never been seen with girlfriends, that he kept his distance even from close colleagues, that his only known family member was Jake Thompson, partner and apparently the only friend of the solitary tycoon. "This is a massacre," Jake said, throwing the newspaper onto the table. "They're painting you as a sociopath." "Maybe I am," Ryan murmured. "Don't say nonsense. You're reserved, not a sociopath. There's a difference." "Is there? Because looking at my life, Jake, I have no one, 32 years old, and the only person I've managed to have a genuine conversation with in recent years was—" He paused. "It was Clara," Jake gently completed. "It was. And now she's gone too. By her choice or yours?" Ryan didn't answer, but the expression on his face said it all. On Friday, Mrs. Smith showed up at the office. "I need to speak with you," she told Marcia, who was trying to explain that Ryan was in a meeting. "It's about Clara." When Ryan received her in his office, the worry on the older woman's face was evident. "She's not well," Mrs. Smith said bluntly. "Her blood pressure has gone up a lot. The doctor is talking about preventive hospitalization." The world stopped. "Internship?" "To monitor the baby. Clara is scared. It's too early still. If the child is born now—" Mrs. Smith didn't finish the sentence. "What can I do?" "Nothing, Mr. Ryan. I just came to inform you. I know you care about her, even if she doesn't believe that anymore." "What do you mean, doesn't believe?" Mrs. Smith studied him. With those perceptive eyes, she saw the news about your company, read about the problems, the protests. She said it was foolish of her to think that— She hesitated. That what? That she could be part of the life of someone so important. That she was naive to believe your interest was genuine. The words hit Ryan like physical blows. "But it is genuine. Everything I felt, that I feel—" "Then why didn't you tell her that when you had the chance?" Ryan had no answer. "She's scared, Mr. Ryan, scared of losing the baby, scared of not being able to support the children alone, scared that Sophia will get hurt if she keeps waiting for a man who may not come back." Mrs. Smith stood up. "I only came to inform you out of courtesy. Clara doesn't know I'm here." "Mrs. Smith, wait." "Yes? Is she going to be okay?" "That depends on many things, Mr. Ryan. Mainly on her being able to stay calm and not worry too much." The woman looked him directly in the eye. "Excessive worry is not good for pregnant women." When Mrs. Smith left, Ryan was alone in his office, staring at the piled-up problems on his desk. Projects at risk, threatened contracts, the company that was his only family slowly crumbling. And somewhere in the city, Clara was struggling to keep safe the life growing inside her, believing that he had chosen his business over her. The worst part was that, in a way, she was right. That night, alone in his apartment overlooking the city, Ryan made a decision that would change everything. He picked up the phone and typed a message. "Clara, I need to see you. There are things I need to explain, please." He stared at the message for over an hour before deleting it without sending. Outside, the first autumn rains began to fall, washing the streets of New York City with a violence that mirrored the storm raging in Ryan Mitchell's heart. The April rain fell over New York City like tears from the sky, turning the streets into dark rivers that reflected the neon lights of the city. It was one of those early mornings in the city where time seemed suspended between night and dawn, when even a metropolis of 12 million people could seem desolate and silent. Ryan drove his BMW through the wet streets, returning from yet another meeting that had stretched until 2 in the morning. The last few days had been a desperate race against time, attempts to renegotiate contracts, meetings with environmentalists, endless sessions with lawyers. The construction company was surviving, but barely. Jake had managed a temporary agreement with the investors, but everyone knew it was just that, temporary. The New York Medical Center loomed before him like a fortress of glass and steel, its illuminated windows dotting the facade like earthly stars. Ryan was there for a routine medical checkup. Annual exams he had been postponing for months due to the crisis at the company. A cruel irony that he finally found time to take care of his own health, just as his professional life was crumbling. He parked in the basement and took the elevator to the 10th floor, where the cardiologist's office was located. The hallway was almost empty, only the sound of his footsteps echoing on the marble floor and the distant murmur of voices coming from somewhere in the hospital. It was then that he saw a familiar figure moving slowly down the corridor on the 7th floor. Clara. Even from behind, even wearing a light blue hospital gown that concealed her shape, Ryan recognized her instantly. She was walking supported by a nurse, one hand protecting her belly, which looked smaller than the last time he saw her. Much smaller. Ryan's heart raced. Without thinking, he abandoned the elevator and ran down the stairs to the 7th floor. He reached the maternity corridor, panting, desperately searching for her among the people milling about. "Excuse me." He approached the first nurse he found, a patient, Clara Johnson. "She was just here a little while ago. Are you family?" Ryan hesitated. What was he to Clara? "I'm a close friend." The nurse studied him with suspicion, but something in his desperate expression convinced her. "She just gave birth. Premature delivery. The baby is in the neonatal ICU." The world spun. How are they?" "The mother is fine, but shaken. The baby? It's too early to say. She was born at 7.5 months. Ryan felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. All those weeks focused only on the company's problems, while Clara faced her own silent battle. "In which room is she?" "Sir, only family." "Please." The word came out as a desperate whisper. I need to know if she is okay." Perhaps it was the desperation in his voice, or maybe the nurse had enough experience to recognize true love when she saw it. She sighed. "Room 7-112, but only 5 minutes." Ryan walked down the corridor as if in a fog. His legs felt like lead, and his hands trembled uncontrollably. When he reached the door of room 7-12, he paused for a moment, gathering courage. Clara was lying in the hospital bed, her pale face contrasting with her dark hair spread out on the white pillow. Her eyes were closed, but Ryan could see she wasn't sleeping. There was a tension in her posture, a rigidity that betrayed worry and pain. Mrs. Smith was sitting in a chair beside the bed, holding one of Clara's hands. Her eyes widened when she saw Ryan at the door. "Mr. Ryan?" she whispered, surprised. The sound made Clara open her eyes. When she saw him, a quick succession of emotions passed over her face. Surprise, embarrassment, something that could be relief, and finally a deep sadness. "Ryan?" Her voice was hoarse, fragile. "What? How did you know?" He approached slowly, as if she were a wounded animal that might flee at any sudden movement. "I was here for an appointment. I saw you in the hallway." "You shouldn't be here," Clara said, but her voice carried no anger, only a deep exhaustion. "How is she?" Ryan asked, ignoring the comment. "The baby." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "Very small, 3 pounds. They don't know yet if—" She couldn't finish. Ryan felt a desperate urge to touch her, to offer some kind of physical comfort, but he kept his hands buried in his pockets, respecting the distance she had established between them. "She will be fine," he said with a conviction he didn't feel. "She will." "You don't know that," Clara replied, a tear rolling down her face. "No one knows." Mrs. Smith stood up discreetly. "I'm going to get some coffee. You two need to talk." When they were alone, silence filled the room like a physical presence. Outside, the rain continued to patter against the windows, creating a hypnotic rhythm that contrasted with the tension of the moment. "Why did you come?" Clara finally asked. "Because—" Ryan struggled to find the right words. "Because I care about you, about both of you." "You care?" There was a new bitterness in her voice. "It's been 3 weeks since I heard from you. 3 weeks since I went on leave and you just disappeared." "You disappeared first," Ryan retorted, but immediately regretted it. This was not the moment for defensiveness. "I'm sorry. You're right. I focused on the company's problems and forgot what really mattered." "And what really matters, Ryan?" The question was heavy, laden with months of unspoken conversations, feelings neither of them had had the courage to fully admit. "You," he said simply. "You and Sophie. And now this little one who's fighting to live." More tears streamed down Clara's face. "You can't say that now. Not when I'm like this. Fragile." "Why not?" "Because when you leave here, you'll go back to your world, to your important meetings and your million-dollar problems. And I'll stay here, trying to keep my daughter alive, working 3 jobs to pay medical bills I can't afford." "And what if I don't go back to that world?" Clara looked at him as if he had spoken in a foreign language. "What are you talking about? What if I choose to stay, here in this world with you?" "Ryan," she shook her head slowly. "You don't understand. It's not a choice you make in one night, in a moment of emotion. It's a lifelong decision. And I can't risk my daughters getting attached to someone who might change their mind." Before Ryan could respond, a nurse entered the room. "Sorry to interrupt, but the neonatal ICU has opened for visits. If you want to see your daughter—" Clara immediately stood up, forgetting Ryan completely. He followed her silently through the sterile hallways until they reached a glass room where several incubators housed tiny babies. Clara's daughter was even smaller than Ryan had expected, a little doll weighing 3 pounds, with tubes and wires connected to her fragile body, fighting to survive in a world she was not yet ready for. Clara pressed her hands against the glass, whispering words of love and encouragement. "She's beautiful," Ryan murmured, and realized it was true. Even surrounded by all that frightening technology, there was something powerful about that tiny creature. "She looks like Sophie when she was born," Clara said, her voice filled with love and fear. "Small but determined. What will you name her?" "Lily. It means bright light." Clara smiled through her tears. It seemed fitting. They watched Lily for several minutes, 2 adults momentarily united by the concern for a life that had barely begun. Ryan felt a transformation happening inside him, a change of priorities so fundamental it was almost physical. "Clara," he said softly, "I want to help." "Ryan, not as charity, not as a handout." He turned to face her. As family. We're not family. We could be." The declaration hung between them like a bridge neither of them knew if they had the courage to cross. A doctor approached, interrupting the moment. "Miss Clara, I would like to discuss Lily's treatment plan." Clara nodded, stepping away from the incubator. Ryan began to step back as well, but she lightly touched his arm. Can you stay, in case I need moral support?" It was the first time in weeks she initiated physical contact with him. Ryan nodded, feeling as if he had won the lottery. The conversation with the doctor was technical, filled with medical terms and success rates that didn't mean much. What was clear was that Lily would need to stay in the hospital for several weeks, possibly months, until her lungs fully developed. "And the costs?" Clara asked, her voice tense. The doctor hesitated. "The health insurance covers the basics, but some specialized treatments." "How much?" Clara insisted. "It's hard to calculate exactly. It could be considerable." Ryan saw the exact moment the weight of the situation hit Clara hard. Her shoulders slumped as if she were carrying the world, and he realized she was mentally calculating how many extra jobs she would need to cover the costs. That night, after Clara finally fell asleep from exhaustion, and Mrs. Smith went home to care for Sophie, Ryan stayed at the hospital. He wandered the halls until he found the administrative office, still partially functioning even in the early morning. "I want to cover all of Lily Johnson's medical expenses," he said to the on-duty staff member, handing over his black credit card. "Sir, those are very high amounts." "It doesn't matter. I want everything paid, and I want it to be anonymous. The family cannot know who paid." "But sir, we need a justification for the records." Ryan thought for a moment. "List it as a donation from a guardian angel, nothing more, when he left the hospital and the sun was already rising over New York City." Ryan drove back to his apartment in a sort of trance, feeling as if he had crossed an invisible line during the night. His life had changed forever. Now he just needed to figure out how to live this new reality without losing everything he had built. Or perhaps, he thought, while watching the city wake up through the window, it was time to redefine what was truly worth building. Mother's Day arrived in New York City, wrapped in a sunny May morning, with that kind of golden light that made the city seem almost romantic despite the urban chaos. Ryan had spent the last 20 days in a state of constant worry, dividing his time between meetings to save the construction company and discreet visits to the hospital to monitor Lily's progress. The little girl had gained almost a pound in the past few weeks, a development that the doctors considered excellent. Clara practically lived at the hospital, only leaving to sleep a few hours at home and spend time with Sophie, who was starting to show signs of jealousy towards her little sister, who received all the attention from their mother. Ryan kept a respectful distance, always appearing in the late afternoons when Clara tended to be in the neonatal ICU. They spoke little, just updates on Lily's health and superficial comments about the weather or the news. But there was something in Clara's eyes that intrigued him, a constant observation, as if she were trying to decipher a complicated puzzle. On the morning of that May Sunday, Ryan made a decision that had been maturing for weeks. He drove to the Brooklyn neighborhood, looking for the house where Clara lived, a charming old brownstone divided into 3 small apartments, with a faded yellow facade and a small wrought-iron balcony on the 2nd floor. Mrs. Smith opened the door, wearing a floral apron and with her hands covered in flour. "Mr. Ryan, what a surprise!" She studied him with curiosity. "Clara isn't here. She's at the hospital, as always. Actually, I came to speak with you, and with Sophie if possible. Of course, come in." Mrs. Smith led him through a small but cozy living room with well-preserved antique furniture and family photographs. Covering one wall, the aroma of carrot cake baking in the oven filled the air, creating a homely atmosphere that Ryan rarely experienced. Sophie came running from the kitchen, wearing a pink dress with unicorn prints and a plastic apron that covered her from head to toe. "Uncle Ryan!" she shouted, rushing to hug him. Ryan crouched down to receive her, still surprised by the natural affection the girl showed. "Did you come to help make the cake for Mommy?" "Sophie, dear, Uncle Ryan didn't come to cook," Mrs. Smith said gently. "Why not?" Sophie asked, genuinely confused. "Everyone can. Help make a cake, it's fun." Ryan looked at the two of them, the grandmother smiling affectionately and the child watching him with pure expectation, and felt something melt inside his chest. "Actually," he said, "I would love to help with the cake." The next hour was one of the strangest and most wonderful of Ryan's life. Sophie taught him how to crack eggs without letting pieces of shell fall into the bowl. "You have to tap it gently and open it slowly, Uncle Ryan." And Mrs. Smith guided him through the process of mixing ingredients in the right order. He discovered there was a strange meditation in beating egg whites and watching the mixture transform in the oven. "Is this your first time making a cake?" Mrs. Smith asked, noticing how he observed each step with scientific fascination. "First time cooking anything other than instant coffee," Ryan admitted. "I imagine men like you usually have people to cook. Men like me? Rich. Important." There was no judgment in her voice, just a factual observation. Sophie, who was licking the frosting bowl, looked up. "Uncle Ryan isn't like the other rich men on TV, Grandma." "No? How is he different?" "The rich. Men on TV are mean. Uncle Ryan makes cake with us." The simplicity of her logic brought a smile to Ryan's face. Sophie is right. Making cake is much more fun than being mean. When the cake was ready, a little lopsided but smelling wonderfully, Ryan finally broached the subject that had brought him there. "Mrs. Smith, I would like to make a proposal." The older woman sat at the kitchen table, gesturing for him to do the same. Sophie continued playing on the floor with dolls, within earshot but seemingly absorbed in her own fantasy. "What kind of proposal?" Ryan took a deep breath. "I want to offer Clara a job. Permanent, at the construction company. Good salary, full benefits, including a premium health plan and daycare for the kids." Mrs. Smith studied him in silence for a long moment. "What kind of work?" "Administrative assistant. She's smart, organized, and good with people. She could learn quickly." "And what would the salary be?" Ryan mentioned an amount that made Mrs. Smith's eyes widen slightly. It was 3 times what Clara earned combining all her jobs. "That's a lot of money, Mr. Ryan. It's a fair salary for the work." "It's a fair salary for an experienced assistant with a college degree. Clara doesn't even have a high school diploma." Ryan felt as if he'd been slapped in the face. In months of conversations with Clara, he had automatically assumed she had at least a secondary education. He had never asked directly, and she had never mentioned it. She didn't finish her studies. She got pregnant with Sophie at 19. Had to stop in her second year to work. Mrs. Smith tilted her head. "Why do you think she works so much? Without a diploma, options are limited." Silence stretched between them. Sophie hummed softly as she brushed a doll's hair, oblivious to the tension that had settled in the kitchen. "That doesn't matter to me," Ryan said finally. "But it will matter to her." "Why?" Mrs. Smith sighed, as if explaining something obvious to a child. "Because Clara has pride, Mr. Ryan, and because she's not foolish. She will realize that she is being favored for reasons that have nothing to do with her professional qualifications." "That's not true. She is capable, intelligent." "I'm sure she is. But would you hire her if she were a 50-year-old man, married, with 2 children? The question hit Ryan like a bullet. The honest answer was no, and they both knew it. I understand your point, he admitted, but the offer still stands. She can grow in the company, study at night, build a career, or she could feel like a dependent, relying on the goodwill of a man who has feelings for her. And what's wrong with that? If I want to help, Mr. Ryan. Mrs. Smith's voice was gentle but firm. May I ask a personal question? Ryan nodded. Have you ever thought about how it would be if the roles were reversed? If it were Clara offering charity to you? It's not charity. No. Then what is it? Ryan struggled to find an answer, but the words tangled in his mind. What was it exactly? Love? Guilt? A desperate desire to be part of their lives? All of the above? It's complicated, he finally murmured. Exactly. And Clara already has enough complications in her life. Sophie approached the table, carrying a doll. Uncle Ryan, are you going to marry Mommy? The question came out of nowhere, with the brutal honesty that only children possess. Ryan choked, and Mrs. Smith hid a smile behind her hand. Why do you ask that, dear? Mrs. Smith said. Because at school, Julia said that when a man keeps giving gifts to a woman, it's because he wants to marry her. Sophie looked at Ryan with curiosity. And you gave the hospital gift to Lily? Ryan's blood ran cold. Sophie, I didn't. The nurse told Mommy about the guardian angel, but Mommy is smart. She knows it was you. Mrs. Smith sighed deeply. Sophie, go play in the living room, dear. But I want to know if there will be a wedding. Yes, my daughter. Now. Sophie stormed out, clearly frustrated at being excluded from the adult conversation. When they were alone, Mrs. Smith looked at Ryan with an expression that mixed understanding and concern. She knows, Ryan said. It was not a question. She knows. And she's furious. Not about the help itself, but about how it was done, in secret, as if she were a beggar who needs anonymous charity. It was meant to be discreet, to avoid embarrassing. Mr. Ryan, you are a smart man in business, but very naive when it comes to women. Mrs. Smith stood up, starting. To clean the kitchen. Clara has fought her whole life to maintain her dignity. She has worked since she was 14, raised a daughter alone, and is now raising another. She has never asked for favors, never accepted handouts. And now she discovers that a man has decided for her what she needed, without even asking. But I wanted to help. I know, and she knows that too. But helping without respecting a person's autonomy is not kindness, Mr. Ryan. It's arrogance disguised as goodness. The words pierced Ryan like sharp blades. He had spent weeks feeling noble for his generosity when in reality he had robbed Clara of the right to choose how to deal with her own difficulties. What should I do? Talk to her. Be honest about your feelings, but also about your limitations, and accept her answer, whatever it may be. Ryan nodded slowly. The job offer. Withdraw the offer, Mr. Ryan. At least for now. If you truly believe Clara has professional potential, help her return to her studies. Pay for a GED program, a college. Give her the tools to earn a good job on her own merit, not through favoritism. It was a wise suggestion, and Ryan knew it, but it also meant a long-term investment in a relationship that didn't even officially exist yet. And what if she doesn't want my help to study? Then respect her decision, and find another way to show that your feelings are real. Ryan left Mrs. Smith's house with more doubts than certainties, but with a new understanding of the complexities of trying to intertwine 2 such different lives. The carrot cake, slightly crooked but made with love, was wrapped in a bag for Clara, along with a card that Sophie had insisted on making. Now he needed to find the courage for a conversation that could change everything, or end it all before it really began. The New York winter arrived with that damp chill that penetrated to the bones, transforming the city into a landscape of grey and concrete under a perpetually cloudy sky. June brought not only the lowest temperatures of the year, but also the season of summer festivals, a tradition that insisted on warming hearts even when the cold tried to freeze them. Mitchell Construction and Associates held its annual summer festival for 12 years, always on the last Saturday of June, always in the same event space in Brooklyn. It was a tradition that Ryan maintained more out of social obligation than personal pleasure, a way to keep employee morale high and project a family business image to clients and investors. This year, however, the festival had a different flavor. Lily had been discharged from the hospital the week before, 5 pounds and 3 ounces of pure determination according to the doctors, and Clara was finally able to breathe again after months of constant tension. Ryan had only seen her in passing in the last few days, casual encounters in the hospital corridors that boiled down to polite greetings and questions about the baby's health. The conversation Mrs. Smith had suggested still hadn't happened. Every time Ryan gathered the courage to seek Clara out, something held him back. An urgent meeting, an issue at the site, or simply the paralyzing fear that his words might only worsen an already complicated situation. "You need to relax," Jake said, watching Ryan adjust the colorful bunting for the 5th time in 10 minutes. The space was decorated in the typical style of summer fairs. Straw scattered on the floor, crepe paper bunting crossing the ceiling, wooden booths offering hot apple cider, corn on the cob, sweet corn, and pumpkin pie. The aroma of roasted peanuts and sweet corn pudding was already beginning to fill the air. "It's a party, not an audit." "Everything is crooked," Ryan murmured, repositioning a blue banner. "The event has to be perfect." "Why? Because Clara is coming?" Ryan froze. "Clara isn't coming." "No? Mary said she invited all the families of the employees. Technically, Clara was our employee for a few weeks. She won't want to come. Not after—" Ryan didn't finish the sentence. "Not after you secretly paid the hospital bills." Jake shook his head. "Man, you really managed to turn a noble gesture into a personal offense. It's almost a talent." Before Ryan could respond, the first guests began to arrive. Employees with their families, some already dressed in country-style clothing, plaid shirts, flared dresses, straw hats. The children ran between the booths, the adults headed straight for the hot apple cider, and gradually the atmosphere came alive with conversations and laughter. Ryan forced a social smile and began to circulate among the guests, greeting couples, complimenting costumes, playing the role of the cordial host everyone expected, but a part of his attention remained fixed on the entrance, searching for a face he knew probably wouldn't appear. That's when he heard Sophie's laughter. He turned and saw her running toward the fishing booth, wearing a flawless country girl costume, a red and white checkered dress, a straw hat adorned with paper flowers, and 2 braids tied with ribbons. Behind her, walking more slowly and carrying Lily in her arms, came Clara. Ryan's heart raced. Clara wore a simple navy blue cotton dress, nothing thematic, but her hair was tied with a colorful ribbon, a small concession to the party's theme. Lily was peacefully asleep in her arms, a tiny baby but visibly stronger than when Ryan first saw her in the neonatal ICU. "Uncle Ryan!" Sophie shouted when she saw him, running to hug him. "You came to our party." "Our party?" Ryan asked, hugging the girl. "It's ours because you invited us. The lady on the phone was super nice." Ryan looked at Clara, who approached with a cautious expression. "Mary called you." "She said all families were welcome," Clara replied, her voice formal. "If you prefer, we can leave." "No!" The response came out louder than Ryan intended. He controlled himself, lowering his voice. "Please stay. I'm glad you came." An awkward moment of silence settled between them, broken only when Lily stirred in Clara's arms, making a small noise. She's bigger, Ryan observed. 5.5 pounds now. The doctors are optimistic. The pride in Clara's voice was evident. Can I? Ryan extended his hands, hesitant. Clara studied him for a moment, then carefully transferred Lily into his arms. The baby was surprisingly light, but Ryan could feel the life pulsing in that tiny body. Lily opened her eyes, brown like her mother's, and looked at him with the solemn curiosity of the very young. "Hi, little warrior," he whispered, and Lily responded with something that could have been a smile. "She likes you," Clara said softly, and there was something in her voice that Ryan couldn't identify. "Uncle Ryan, come help me fish." Sophie tugged at the hem of his jacket. "I want to catch a goldfish." Ryan returned Lily to Clara and allowed Sophie to drag him to the fishing booth. For the next hour, he found himself completely absorbed in the girl's world, helping her catch plastic fish, buying cotton candy, teaching her to toss rings. It was as if a part of him he didn't even know existed had awakened. Clara watched them from a distance, rocking Lily in her arms whenever the baby became restless. Ryan caught her smiling a few times, small but genuine smiles that made his heart race. It was when they were at the hot apple cider booth that the bomb exploded. Mr. Mitchell, one of the nurses from New York Medical Center, approached with a radiant smile. "What a pleasure to see you here, and with the family of little Lily." Ryan felt the blood run cold in his veins. The nurse, Sarah, he remembered correctly, had been one of the professionals who cared for Lily in the neonatal ICU. "Good evening, Sarah," he said, trying to keep his voice casual. "Mrs. Johnson, how is our little warrior?" Sarah turned to Clara, who had come closer upon hearing the conversation. "Very well, thank you," Clara replied, but Ryan could see the tension growing on her face. "That's great, and how generous of Mr. Mitchell to cover all the expenses. A true guardian angel." Sarah smiled at Ryan. "We rarely see such noble gestures. Most people prefer to remain anonymous, but it's obvious it was you. Who else would have the means and reason to—" "Sarah," Ryan interrupted desperately, but it was too late. Clara's face had transformed into a mask of understanding and humiliation. She looked at Ryan, then at the nurse, then back at Ryan. "You," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It was you who paid for everything." It wasn't a question. The truth was written all over Ryan's embarrassment, and Sarah's confused smile, who finally realized she had said too much. "Clara, I can explain." "Explain what?" Clara's voice rose, attracting curious glances from nearby guests. "Explain how you decided I was a beggar who needed charity. Explain how you paid my daughter's bills. My back, as if I were incapable of taking care of my own family?" Sophie, who had been playing nearby, approached with a worried expression. "Mommy? Why are you yelling at Uncle Ryan?" "Let's go, Sophie," Clara said, taking her daughter by the hand. "Now!" "But I haven't finished playing." "Now, Sophie!" Clara's tone allowed. No discussion. Ryan stepped toward her. "Clara, please let me explain. It wasn't like that." "What wasn't it like?" Clara spun to face him, her eyes shining with anger, and held back tears. "Wasn't it you who decided, without consulting me, that I needed your charity? Wasn't it you who humiliated me in front of the doctors, the nurses, making me look like an unworthy poor person who needs the generosity of a kind, wealthy man? I wanted to help. You wanted to feel important. You wanted to be the hero of the story." Her voice was now clearly audible to many guests who had stopped their conversations to watch the unfolding drama. "You never cared to ask if I wanted your help, if I needed your pity." "It's not pity?" "Then what is it, Ryan?" Clara was openly crying now, but her voice remained steady. "What am I to you? A charity project? A way to ease your guilt of being rich? A fantasy of being the savior of a poor woman and her daughters?" The words hit Ryan like physical slaps. Around them, silence spread through the party like a wave. Staff whispered among themselves. Children stopped playing. Even the background music seemed to lower in volume. "You are—" Ryan struggled to find words. "You are important to me. Very important. Like a pet is important? Like a charity case is important?" Clara shook her head, a tear rolling down her cheek. "You don't even know me, Ryan. You never cared to know who I really am, what my dreams are, my fears. You just decided that I needed to be saved." "That's not true, isn't it?" "Then tell me, Ryan, what is my biggest dream? What scares me the most? What was the happiest day of my life?" Clara waited, but he couldn't answer. "See? You fell in love with a version of me that you created in your head, with the idea of being my savior." Sophie tugged at her mother's dress. "Mommy, Uncle Ryan is crying." It was true. Tears were streaming down Ryan's face, and he hadn't even noticed. "Clara, please, no." She raised one hand, still holding Lily with the other. "I don't want your pity anymore, your favors, your charity disguised as kindness. I want my dignity back." She turned to leave, but Ryan followed her. "What if it's not charity? What if it's love?" Clara stopped, but didn't turn around. "True love respects. True love asks before acting. True love sees the person as they are, not as a problem to be solved. I can learn. You can, but not with me." Finally, she turned to face him one last time. "My family and I deserve someone who loves us as we are, not despite who we are." Clara left the party carrying Lily and pulling Sophie by the hand, leaving Ryan standing in the middle of the decorated hall with hundreds of eyes on him and a shattered heart. Jake approached, placing a gentle hand on his friend's shoulder. "Come on," he said softly. "Let's get out of here." But Ryan didn't move. He continued to stare at the door through which Clara had exited, finally understanding the difference between loving someone and wanting to save them, and wondering if it was too late to learn how to love truly. The smell of hot apple cider and roasted peanuts now made him feel nauseous. The colorful banners seemed to mock his sadness, and the country music sounded like a lament. The party continued around him, but Ryan Mitchell had never felt so alone in his life. The winter in New York City intensified in December, bringing with it a chill that seemed to penetrate not just the skin, but the soul. Ryan had become a ghost of himself, moving through life with the mechanical precision of a well-programmed robot. He went to the office, presided over meetings, made business decisions, and returned to his empty apartment. He repeated the routine day after day, as if the monotony could anesthetize the pain he carried in his chest since the summer fair. Jake watched his friend with growing concern. Ryan had visibly lost weight, developed deep circles under his eyes, and his obsession with work had reached alarming levels. He arrived at the office before 6 in the morning and left after 11 at night, as if he could find redemption in contracts and spreadsheets. "You need to get out of this," Jake said one Monday morning, entering the office with 2 cups of coffee and finding Ryan already hunched over architectural plans. "It's been 3 weeks since that night. You can't keep punishing yourself like this." "I'm not punishing myself, I'm working." Ryan didn't lift his eyes from the plans. "The company needs my full attention. The company needs a CEO who doesn't look like a zombie." Ryan finally looked at his friend. His eyes, usually piercing and focused, seemed empty. "I'm fine, Jake. You're a mess, Ryan, and you know it." Before Ryan could respond, Mary entered the office with a strange expression on her face. "Mr. Mitchell, there's a lady here who insists on speaking with you. She said it's urgent." "I didn't schedule any meetings. She's not a client. It's Mrs. Smith." The name hit Ryan like an electric shock. He stood up abruptly, knocking papers in the process. "Send her in." Mrs. Smith entered the office with the same quiet dignity Ryan remembered, but there was something different about her posture, an urgency that hadn't been present in previous meetings. She wore a simple yet elegant black wool coat, and her hands tightly held a brown leather bag. "Mrs. Smith," Ryan said, gesturing for her to sit. She sat down. "How are Clara and the girls?" "That's what I came to talk about." She perched on the edge of her chair, clearly tense. "Clara got another job at a cleaning service downtown. She's working 16 hours a day to pay the bills." Ryan felt his stomach tighten. 16 hours. She leaves home at 4 in the morning and comes back at 11 at night. Sophie barely sees her mother. Lily spends all day with me. Mrs. Smith shook her head. "She's killing herself working out of pride." "I offered help." "You offered charity," Mrs. Smith corrected him firmly. "There's a difference." Jake, who had remained silent until then, stood up. "I'll let you two talk privately." When they were alone, Mrs. Smith studied Ryan with those perceptive eyes. "You look terrible." "Thanks for the honesty. That wasn't a compliment," she sighed. "You two are as stubborn as mules. She's killing herself working to prove she doesn't need anyone, and you're killing yourself with guilt for trying to help the wrong way." "I don't know how to fix this, Mrs. Smith. I tried calling, I tried sending flowers, I tried everything I think to do seems wrong. It's because you keep thinking like a rich man." "What can I give to solve the problem?" Mrs. Smith leaned forward. "Clara doesn't want anything given to her. She wants to be seen as an equal. But we're not equals. I have money, opportunities, education. It's not about that, Mr. Mitchell. It's about respect, about recognizing that she has the intelligence, strength, and ability to make her own decisions." Ryan ran his hands through his hair, frustrated. "So what should I do? How do I show that I respect her without seeming condescending?" Mrs. Smith watched him in silence for a long moment. Then, to Ryan's surprise, her eyes filled with tears. "Can I share something that might help you understand?" Ryan nodded. "My son, Sophie's father, was named Diego." She opened her bag and pulled out a faded photo. A young man with dark hair, smiling, with the same kind eyes as Clara. He was a sweet boy, hard-working. He dreamed of having his own workshop. Clara told me about him. "Did she say he died in a motorcycle accident?" Mrs. Smith carefully put the photo away. "That's true, but there are things she doesn't know." Ryan furrowed his brow. "What kind of things?" "Diego grew up in the same orphanage as you." The world stopped. Ryan felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. "What?" "St. Vincent's home in the East Side. He was 3 years younger than you, but he often talked about an older boy, Ryan, who had been adopted by a rich family." Mrs. Smith watched him closely. "He said that this older boy was kind to the little ones, protecting the younger children from the bigger ones." Ryan abruptly stood up, walking to the window. Memories began to flood back. Fragmented images of a small, dark-haired boy who used to follow him down the orphanage halls. "Little Diego," he whispered. "We used to call him Little Diego." "Exactly." Mrs. Smith's voice was heavy with emotion. "He never forgot you. When he was adopted at 14 by us, we were older, we couldn't have biological children. He still talked about the brother Ryan, who had found a good family." Ryan turned slowly. Diego was little Diego. He was. And when he met Clara, when he learned she was pregnant, he talked a lot about wanting to be a present father. Different from the fathers you both never had in the orphanage. Tears now streamed freely down Ryan's face. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you need to understand, when you look at Sophie, at Lily, you're not just seeing the daughters of a woman you fell in love with. You're seeing the daughters of the boy you once considered a brother." Mrs. Smith stood up, moving closer to him. And when Clara sees you being kind to her daughters, a part of her, even without consciously knowing it, feels like she's seeing a piece of the father they lost. She doesn't know. No. Diego died before he could tell her about his past. Clara knows he grew up in an orphanage, but she doesn't know which one, nor that he knew. You? Ryan sat heavily in the chair, trying to process the revelation. Why didn't you tell her? Because it's not my story to tell. It's yours. Mrs. Smith returned to her chair. But now you understand why Sophie clung to you so quickly. Why Clara, despite all her rational resistance, feels an inexplicable connection. Blood, Ryan murmured. Not biological blood, but something deeper. The family you choose, the people who become brothers in adversity. Mrs. Smith nodded. Diego always said he wanted to find you one day, to thank you for taking care of him when you were kids. He never imagined it would be you taking care of his daughters. Silence stretched between them, heavy with emotional weight. Outside, New York City continued its frantic dance, but inside the office, time seemed suspended. What should I do with this information? Ryan finally asked. What you think is right, but maybe it helps to understand that what you feel is not just physical attraction or a desire to save someone. It's recognition. It's familial love transforming into romantic love. And Clara? Clara needs to know who you really are. Not the rich businessman, not the man who tries to solve problems with money. She needs to know the boy who protected her Diego when they were both small and vulnerable. Mrs. Smith stood up to leave, but paused at the door. Mr. Mitchell? One last thing. Clara is working cleaning the Empire State Building downtown, the night shift. If you want to have an honest conversation without an audience, without distractions, maybe this is the right moment. After she left, Ryan was left alone with his thoughts and memories. Little Diego, the small boy who used to sleep in the bunk next to his, who shared the sweets that he had. Raphael had been adopted at 12 years old, and now he understood the sense of familiarity he felt when meeting Clara, the inexplicable ease with which Sophie had bonded with him, and the instinctive protection he felt for the two girls. It wasn't a coincidence. It was destiny. Or perhaps, Raphael thought as he looked at the photo of Diego that Mrs. Smith had left on his desk, it was simply love, fulfilling a promise made long ago between two boys who had vowed to take care of each other, no matter what happened. Now, Raphael needed to decide if he had the courage to honor that promise in the only way that still mattered, by taking care of the people Diego loved most in the world. September in New York City arrived with the timid promise of spring, chilly mornings that transformed into sunny afternoons, as if the entire city was waking up from a long, emotional winter. Raphael had spent the last few weeks on an emotional roller coaster, alternating between the devastating revelation about Diego and the paralysis of not knowing how to use that information to reconnect with Clara. He had gone to the Copacabana building 3 times during the night, searching for her. 3 times he had given up at the entrance, overwhelmed by the certainty that his presence would be interpreted as yet another attempt to intrude in her life. The last thing Clara needed was for her boss to show up at her workplace in the middle of the night. It was Jake who suggested a different approach. "Stop trying to be the hero of the story," he said one Thursday morning, finding Raphael once again lost in thought. "Want to reconnect with her? Be human. Be the guy she met before she found out you had money. How? Go do something normal, something anyone would do on a sunny Saturday with a child." And that's how Raphael found himself in Central Park on a Saturday morning, pushing Lily in a borrowed stroller while watching Sophie play on the playground. There was no elaborate plan, no rehearsed speech, just a man taking a child to play in the park, like thousands of parents did every weekend. Sophie had insisted on dressing him appropriately for the occasion: jeans, sneakers, and a simple cotton shirt that Mrs. Smith had chosen. You have to look like a normal dad, Uncle Ryan, or the other kids will think it's weird, she had explained, with the seriousness of someone who perfectly understood the social dynamics of the playground. Lily, now 5 months old and weighing 7.5 pounds, watched everything with wide, curious eyes. She had developed the habit of holding Raphael's finger whenever he picked her up, and that small gesture never failed to melt something inside his chest. "Uncle Ryan, push me on the swing!" Sophie shouted from across the playground. Raphael was crossing the play area, carrying Lily, when he heard a familiar voice behind him. "Sophie, Sophie, where are you?" He turned and saw Clara running through the park, clearly in a panic, her hair disheveled, and her face marked by the desperation of a mother who had lost sight of her daughter. "Mommy!" Sophie waved excitedly from the swing. "I'm here! Uncle Ryan brought me to play." Clara stopped abruptly when she saw Raphael. A succession of emotions passed over her face: relief at finding Sophie, confusion at seeing her with Raphael, and then a cold anger as she fully processed the situation. "What's going on? Here," she asked, approaching with stiff steps. "Mommy, Uncle Ryan came to get us. He said he wanted to take me to play." Sophie jumped off the swing and ran to her mother, and he brought a new stroller for Lily. "Came to get you?" Clara looked at Raphael with a dangerous expression. "Without consulting me?" Raphael felt his stomach drop. "Clara, I can explain. You can explain how you took my daughter out of the house without my permission. How you got Mrs. Smith to let Sophie go with you. Mrs. Smith isn't home," Sophie interrupted, oblivious to the tension between the adults. "She went to visit her sister at the medical center. I was alone when Uncle Ryan came." The blood drained from Clara's face. "You were alone? Sophie, where did I say to stay when Grandmother Smith isn't home?" "Inside, with the door locked," Sophie recited, clearly knowing she had disobeyed. "But Uncle Ryan is trustworthy, and I was bored." "Sophie Johnson," Clara's voice rose dangerously, "you could have been kidnapped. Anything could have happened." The little girl began to cry, finally realizing the gravity of the situation. Raphael stepped closer, instinctively wanting to protect her from the embarrassment, but Clara stepped between them. "No," she said, pointing her finger at him. "Don't you dare comfort her. You don't have that right." "Clara, please, she's just a child." "Exactly. She's a child, my child, and you took her out of the house without my permission." Tears of anger streamed down Clara's face. "What kind of man does that? What kind of person takes advantage of a 5-year-old to—" "To what, Clara?" Raphael finally exploded, his own anger surfacing. "To kidnap her, to hurt her, or to give her a few hours of fun that she clearly needed? It's not your decision to make." "You're right, it's not." Raphael stepped closer, lowering his voice, but maintaining intensity. "Just like it wasn't my decision to pay the medical bills, just like it wasn't my decision to offer a job. I know I made mistakes, Clara. I know I acted for the wrong reasons, in the wrong way, but this—" He gestured to Sophie, who was still crying. "This I did for the right reasons." "What reasons?" "Because she called me crying, saying she was scared alone at home, because a 5-year-old shouldn't be alone for hours, while her mother worked 16 hours a day to prove a point." The words hit Clara like physical slaps. She looked at Sophie, who had stopped crying and was watching the scene unfold. Two adults with big eyes. I didn't know Mrs. Smith wasn't—" she whispered. "Of course you didn't know, because you've been working so hard that you can barely breathe." Ryan ran his hands through his hair, frustrated. "Clara, you're killing yourself out of pride." "It's not pride," she shouted. "It's dignity. It's the difference between deserving what I have and accepting handouts from someone who feels sorry for me." "Sorry?" Ryan stared at her incredulously. "Do you think what I feel for you is pity? I don't know what you feel. I don't know if you even know what you feel." Lily, who had remained silent in the stroller, began to cry amidst all the tension. Clara automatically moved to pick her up, but Ryan anticipated her, taking the baby from the stroller and cradling her against his chest. "Shh, little one," he murmured, and Lily immediately calmed down, her tiny fists clutching his shirt. Clara watched the scene with an unreadable expression. "She calms down with you," she said softly. "She calms down because she knows me, because I spent hours at the medical center by her crib, singing the same songs I used to sing for—" He stopped abruptly. "For who?" Ryan looked at Sophie, who had stopped crying and was watching them intently. He looked at Lily, quiet in his arms. He looked at Clara, waiting for an answer he didn't know how to give. "For David," he finally said. "I sang for David when we were kids." The confusion on Clara's face was instantaneous. "How did you knew David?" "I did." Ryan sat down, on a nearby bench, still holding Lily. "We grew up in the same orphanage, St. Vincent's Home. He was 3 years younger than me, but we were close. I took care of him." Clara slowly sat down beside him, as if her legs had lost strength. That's impossible." "His name was David Johnson. He arrived at the orphanage when he was 5, after his parents died in a fire. He was afraid of the dark, so I used to sing to him until he fell asleep." Ryan looked at Lily. "The same songs I sing to her." How do you know all this?" "Mrs. Smith told me, last week." Sophie approached timidly. "Uncle Ryan, did you know my daddy?" Ryan's heart tightened. "I did, Princess. Your daddy was like a little brother to me when we were small." "Did he talk about you?" Clara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mrs. Smith said yes. He talked about Uncle Ryan, who had been adopted." Ryan turned to face Clara. "That's why Sophie attached to me so quickly. That's why I feel this connection with you. It's not a coincidence, Clara. It's family." Tears streamed down Clara's face, but now they were different, not from anger, but from understanding and deep sadness. "David always said he had an older brother who was adopted by a rich family," she murmured. "He said that brother protected him from the bigger boys, shared food when there was little Dave." Ryan smiled through his own tears. "I called him Little Dave." "He hated that nickname when he grew up." Clara laughed and cried at the same time. "I can imagine, but to me he was always Little Dave, the brave boy who didn't cry even when the others teased him." Sophie had sat on the ground at their feet, listening to every word with fascination. "So you are really family." "We are, Princess. Your daddy and I were brothers at heart. And now can you be our brother too?" The innocent question echoed among the 3 adults. Ryan looked at Clara, searching for some sign of how she was processing all these revelations. "Clara," he said gently, "now you understand why I couldn't stay away, why I feel this need to protect you. It's not pity, it's not charity, it's familial love that has turned into something more." "Into what?" she asked, although her eyes already showed that she knew the answer. "Into romantic love, into wanting to build a real family, into wanting to honor the promise I made to little Dave when we were kids, that we would always take care of each other." Clara closed her eyes, the tears still flowing. "Why didn't you tell me before?" "Because I was afraid you would think I was making up a story to manipulate you. Because I only found out last week." Ryan shifted Lily in his arms. "And because I knew that if I told you, you would feel obligated to accept me back, and I don't want that. I want you to choose me for who I am, not for who David was." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the sounds of the park. Children playing, birds singing, life happening around them as they processed 25 years of coincidences that perhaps were not coincidences. "Uncle Ryan," Sophie finally said, "can I ask you a question?" "Of course, Princess. Do you love my mommy?" The direct question made with the brutal honesty of children, made Clara open her eyes and look directly at Ryan. "I do," he answered without hesitation. "I love your mommy, I love you, I love your little sister, I love you all as family, and I love your mommy as the woman I want to spend the rest of my life with." "And you, mommy?" Sophie turned to Clara. "Do you love Uncle Ryan?" Clara looked at her daughter, then at Lily sleeping peacefully in Ryan's arms, then at the man who had revealed himself to be much more complex and connected to her life than she had ever imagined. She began, then stopped. "It's complicated, Sophie." "Why is it complicated? Daddy always said love is the simplest thing in the world." Ryan smiled. "Your daddy was always wise, even when he was little." Clara watched him for a long moment. "What do you want, Ryan? Really?" "I want a chance, a real chance to get to know you for who you truly are, to let you get to know me for who I really am. I want to build something together, as equals, not as savior and saved." He hesitated. "And I want to fulfill the promise I made to David a long time ago, to take care of the people he loved." Clara smiled for the first time since they met at the park. "One chance," she finally said, "but with clear rules. No trying to save me, no making decisions for me, no expensive gifts or grand gestures." "And what can I offer?" "Time, conversation, honesty." Ryan carefully transferred Lily to her. The baby grumbled slightly but quickly settled into her mother's familiar arms. "Now can you take me for ice cream? All this adult talk made me hungry," Sophie piped up, standing between them. Ryan and Clara laughed, and for the first time in months, the laughter was genuine and shared. "You can choose the flavor, princess," Ryan said, offering his hand to help Clara up. She took his hand, and when their fingers touched, they both felt something fundamental had changed. Autumn was giving way to spring, bringing with it the promise of new beginnings built on more solid foundations, not of money or charity, but of shared history, true love, and the wisdom of two adults willing to honor the memory of a man who had loved deeply and been deeply loved. As they walked toward the ice cream shop, Sophie chattering excitedly. Between them, Lily sleeping in Clara's arms, and Ryan pushing the empty stroller, they looked exactly like what they were. A family reuniting after a long separation. A family that Diego would have been proud to see together. December arrived in New York City with that humid, heavy heat that turned the city into an open-air sauna. The New York summer was just beginning, but already promised to be intense. Just like the last 3 months had been for Ryan and Clara, who had spent the time carefully navigating the early stages of a relationship built on completely new foundations. The promise made in Central Park had materialized into cautious yet consistent meetings. Ryan would show up at the family's home on Saturday mornings, always bringing fresh coffee from the bakery, and sometimes helping Sophie with her math homework. Clara had resumed her studies in a night school program that Ryan was financing, not as a gift, but as an investment in a partnership being built brick by brick, conversation by conversation. Lily, now 8 months old, had taken her first wobbly steps right into Ryan's arms one November afternoon, a moment that made Clara cry with emotion and finally admit to herself that the feelings she had for him had evolved from distrust to something much deeper. But it was in December that everything changed definitively. The construction company was facing its biggest crisis. Foreign investors, a German group specializing in hostile takeovers, had made a formal offer to buy the company for a price that, while tempting, was far below what Ryan considered fair. Jake had been under increasing pressure from his wife to sell his share and invest in a quieter life in the countryside. "I can't do this anymore, Ryan," Jake said one Monday morning, sitting in the office where so many important decisions had been made. "Emily is pregnant with twins. She wants security. She wants me to stop living on the financial edge." Ryan watched the hustle and bustle of Wall Street through the panoramic windows. It was almost ironic. The same view that a year ago represented power and success now seemed just a reminder of what he was about to lose. How much are they offering for your share? Enough to buy a nice house in the countryside and set up a small but stable architecture office. Jake sighed. It's a good offer, Ryan, and you know that if I sell, you'll be vulnerable. They'll gain majority control. I know. So why aren't you trying to convince me to stay? Ryan turned to his friend. Because you're right. Emily and the babies deserve stability, and you deserve a life where you don't have to worry about whether you can pay the bills next month. And you, what will you do? I don't know yet. It was a lie. Ryan knew exactly what he would do, but he hadn't yet found the courage to verbalize the decision that had been maturing for weeks. That night, he went to Clara's home for dinner, as had become customary on Mondays and Wednesdays. Sophie greeted him at the door with a drawing she had made at school, a family of 4 holding hands, with "Our Family" written in colorful, crooked letters. "Do you like it, Uncle Ryan? The teacher said to draw our family, so I drew you, too." Ryan's heart tightened. "It's beautiful, Princess. Can I keep it?" "Of course. I made it just for you." Clara appeared from the kitchen carrying Lily, who immediately reached out her little arms to Ryan. It was a ritual Lily only accepted to eat. If she was in his arms, a peculiarity that simultaneously melted Ryan's heart and made Clara laugh. "How was your day?" Clara asked, watching him spoon baby food into Lily's mouth. "Complicated. Jake is going to sell his share in the company." Clara stopped chopping vegetables for dinner. "Is that bad for you?" "It means I'll probably lose control of the construction company. The Germans will have the majority." "And then?" Ryan hesitated. For months, Clara had shown genuine interest in his business problems, but always kept a respectful distance. She never offered unsolicited advice or tried to influence his decisions. It was something he appreciated immensely. After a lifetime of people wanting something from him, having someone who simply listened was a gift. "Then I need to make an important decision. Do you want to talk about it after the girls go to sleep?" It was another ritual they had developed. After Sophie went to bed and Lily fell asleep, they would sit down. On the small balcony of the house with 2 cups of coffee, they talked about their days, plans, and worries. These were the most honest conversations Ryan had ever had in his life. Later, when the house was quiet and they were sitting side by side on the balcony, watching the nighttime activity on the street, Ryan finally found the courage to verbalize his thoughts. "Clara, I have a proposal for you." She looked at him with that cautious expression that always appeared when he mentioned proposals. "What kind of proposal?" "The Germans want to buy the company for $60 million. It's less than it's worth, but it's enough money for other things." "What other things?" Ryan took a deep breath. "I want to use part of that money to make a partnership proposal. For you." "Ryan, just listen to me until the end, please." He turned to face her. "You've always talked about wanting your own cafe, a kitchen where you can make your chicken pot pies and sweets and sell them. And I've always wanted to build something that truly matters, not just expensive buildings for rich people. Where are you going with this?" "I want us to start a business together. Not me giving you money, but both of us as equal partners. You with your culinary skills and knowledge of what people really want to eat, and me with capital and business experience." Clara was silent for a long moment, which Ryan had learned to interpret as a sign that she was seriously processing what he had said. 50-50? She finally asked. 50-50? Would I make decisions equal to yours? All important decisions would be made together. And what if we fought, if the business didn't work out? Then we would argue as partners, not as boss and employee. And if it didn't work out, We would split the losses equally. Clara stood up, walking to the balcony railing. The silence stretched, punctuated only by the distant sound of traffic and the noise of a television in a neighboring house. "Why now?" she asked. "Why this proposal now?" "Because I realized that spending the last 20 years building an empire didn't make me happy, but the last 3 months helping Sophie with her homework, feeding Lily and talking with you about the future, that made me happy. What if it's just a phase? What if you get tired of playing family? Then you will have your own successful business, and you can send me away with your head held high." Clara laughed, but it was a nervous laugh. "It's a tempting proposal. But I don't know if I'm ready to mix business with this." She gestured between the two of them. "This what, Clara?" She turned to face him, and Ryan saw vulnerability in her eyes. "You know what? No, I don't. I need you to say it. This thing that's happening between us, this feeling that I'm trying not to nurture because I'm afraid of getting hurt or hurting the girls." Ryan stood up, slowly approaching her. "What feeling?" "Ryan, say it, Clara. What feeling?" "Love," she whispered. "I'm falling in love with you, and that terrifies me." It was the first time either of them had verbalized what was happening between them. Ryan felt as if the whole world had stopped to listen to that confession. "Why does it terrify you?" "Because you can still change your mind. Because Sophie already talks about you as if you were her father. Because Lily cries when you're not here. Because Her voice faltered. "Because you what?" "Because I cry too when you're not here." Ryan gently touched her face, wiping away a tear that had fallen. "Clara, look at me." She raised her eyes, and Ryan saw all the fear and hope she carried in them. "I love you," he said simply. "I love you, I love Sophie, I love Lily, I love the family the 4 of us have become, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving that every day." "How?" "By marrying you, officially adopting the girls, building a business together, a life together, a future together." He smiled. "And if that means selling the construction company I've spent 20 years building, then so be it." Clara kissed him. It was a soft kiss, hesitant at first, but quickly transforming into something deeper, a promise, an agreement, a declaration that they were both ready to bet everything on what they had built together. When they pulled away, Clara was smiling through tears. "So," she said, "let's talk about the details of this partnership." A week later, Ryan signed the papers selling Mitchell Construction and Associates to the German group. Jake used his share to buy a house in Aspen and fulfill his dream of a simpler life. Ryan used his share to purchase a strategic commercial space in Brooklyn and establish Clara and Ryan Homemade Flavors, LLC. On December 31st, as New York City exploded with fireworks to celebrate the arrival of a new year, Ryan knelt on the same balcony where they had their most important conversation and proposed to Clara with a simple yet lovingly chosen ring. Sophie cheered enthusiastically when Clara said yes. Lily, who had woken up to the noise of the fireworks, gurgled with joy in Mrs. Smith's arms, who was crying with emotion. "David would be proud," Mrs. Smith whispered in Ryan's ear when he hugged her. "I hope so," Ryan replied, looking at Clara, who was holding Sophie in her arms and laughing with their daughter about wedding plans. 6 months later, on a sunny Saturday in June, Clara Johnson became Clara Mitchell in a small but joyful ceremony at the neighborhood church. Sophie was the flower girl. Lily slept peacefully throughout the ceremony in Mrs. Smith's arms, and Jake came especially from Aspen to be the best man. The cafe opened its doors 2 months after the wedding, in a celebration that brought half the neighborhood together to taste Clara's famous chicken pot pies, the sweets that Ryan had learned to make under his patient guidance. The success was immediate. Within 6 months, they had a waiting list and plans for expansion. Sophie, now officially Sophie Johnson, divided her time between school, playing in the park, and helping at the diner on weekends, always proud to tell customers that her parents had the best business in the neighborhood. Lily took her first definitive steps among the tables of the diner, provoking applause from customers and tears of pride from her parents. She grew up listening to the stories that Ryan told about his biological father, learning that love can take many forms and that family is something built with daily choices of care and dedication. And every night, when they closed the diner and returned home, a larger home they had bought together, where each room was chosen with the girls' happiness in mind, Ryan and Clara would sit on the porch and talk about the day, the plans, the dreams fulfilled, and those still to be realized. It was a simple life, built on honest work and true love. There were no mansions or luxury cars, but there was something much more valuable: the certainty that each person in that family had chosen to be there and continued to choose every day. And sometimes, on the quietest nights, Ryan would look at the stars and whisper a thank you to David, for the brave boy he had been, for the hard-working man he had become, and for the two little warriors he had left for Ryan to protect and love. It was, he knew, exactly the family that the two orphan boys had dreamed of having one day, never imagining they would achieve it in such an unexpected and perfect way.